The sun was sinking behind the red cliffs of the Arizona Territory in the year 1874, painting the desert in shades of blood and gold. Dusk clung to the air as Ethan Cole, a hardened cowboy and former Union scout, rode slowly along a dry riverbed. His rifle rested across his saddle, his eyes sharp with the instincts of a man who had survived too many ambushes. This land was dangerous. Ranchers whispered stories of Apache raids, burned homesteads, and vanished travelers. The U.S. Army called it hostile territory. To Ethan, it was simply unforgiving land that punished the careless. Then he saw the smoke. Thin, gray strands rose from behind a cluster of mesquite trees. Ethan dismounted, moved silently, and crept forward. His hand tightened on the rifle. One wrong move could mean death. When he parted the brush, his breath caught. It wasn't a war party. It was a family. A weary Apache woman sat near a small fire, her face marked with exhaustion. Two children clung to her blanket, eyes wide with fear. Nearby stood an older man, thin, wounded, barely able to stand. A spear lay on the ground, broken. They had no horses, no weapons worth mentioning. They were not hunters tonight. They were running. Ethan raised his rifle anyway. Years of fear and hatred pressed into his bones. He had lost friends to Apache attacks. The law would reward him for turning them in or killing them. The woman met his eyes. She didn't scream. She didn't beg. She simply pulled the children closer and waited. In that moment, Ethan saw something that shattered years of stories, not enemies but people. A mother protecting her children, a family trying to survive a war they never chose. Slowly, Ethan lowered his rifle. He stepped into the clearing, hands open, showing he meant no harm. The old man spoke first, his voice weak but steady. In broken English, he said, "We do not fight. Soldiers burned our village. We flee." Ethan felt a weight settle in his chest. He could walk away. He could turn them in, or he could do something that would change everything. He chose mercy. Ethan gave them water. He shared his food. He tore strips from his shirt to bind the old man's wound. When soldiers' distant voices echoed through the valley, Ethan led the family through a hidden canyon, a route only scouts and smugglers knew. Before dawn, they were gone. The woman touched her forehead to the ground in gratitude. The children looked back once, then disappeared into the desert. Ethan thought that was the end of it. He was wrong. Years later, word spread quietly among certain Apache bands of a white cowboy who chose mercy over blood. That story traveled faster than bullets. Months later, when violence erupted near a trading post, it was Apache scouts who warned settlers in advance, saving dozens of lives. Army officers were stunned. Something was changing. The old man Ethan had helped was not just an elder. He was a respected advisor to Chief Nahilzai, a leader seeking peace rather than endless war. When negotiations with the U.S. Army nearly collapsed due to mistrust, Nahilzai told one story again and again. "A cowboy spared my people when he did not have to." That story became a bridge. Ethan Cole was eventually summoned, not as a soldier but as a witness. He stood between two worlds that hated each other and spoke only one truth. Mercy had power where violence failed. In 1878, a local peace agreement was signed, small, fragile, but real. It reduced bloodshed in the region and allowed families, both settler and Apache, to survive another generation. Historians would later argue about treaties, politics, and strategy. But among the Apache, the truth was simpler. It began with one man, one rifle lowered, one choice. Ethan Cole never called himself a hero. He returned to ranch work, lived quietly, and died unknown. But history remembered what hatred could not erase. A single act of mercy changed the course of many lives and proved that even in the harshest times, humanity could rewrite destiny. The desert never forgot footsteps. Even weeks after Ethan Cole led the Apache family through the hidden canyon, the land still whispered of pursuit, broken twigs, boot prints half buried by sand, the faint smell of smoke where soldiers had passed. Ethan returned to his ranch work, but sleep no longer came easily. Every night he saw the woman's steady eyes and the children's silent fear. Mercy, he discovered, was heavier than violence. One evening, as the wind howled across the plains, Ethan was repairing a fence when his horse, Ranger, suddenly stiffened. Its ears twitched. Someone was watching. Ethan slowly reached for his rifle but stopped. From the ridge emerged 3 Apache riders. Their faces were painted for travel, not war. They carried rifles, but none were raised. At their center rode a young man with a hawk feather tied to his braid, a sign of a messenger. The rider dismounted first and spoke in calm, careful English. "You are Ethan Cole." It wasn't a question. Ethan nodded. "I am." The rider placed his hand over his heart. "My name is Taza. You saved my family." Ethan felt the air leave his lungs. Taza was the older child, the boy who had watched him from behind his mother's blanket. "You should not have come here," Ethan said quietly. "The army?" "They do not know," Taza replied. "And they will not. My people remember those who choose life." The riders brought gifts, dried meat, a finely worked leather pouch, and a stone carved with Apache symbols. Ethan tried to refuse, but Taza shook his head. "This is not payment," he said. "It is a promise." Before leaving, Taza delivered a warning. A rogue band, desperate and angry, planned to raid a nearby settlement. They would not listen to elders. Blood would be spilled, Apache and settler alike. Ethan mounted his horse before dawn. He rode hard to the settlement of Dry Creek, where families were already uneasy. The sheriff doubted him. Others called him a liar. But Ethan stood his ground. "Move the women and children," he said. "Post guards. Don't fire unless fired upon." That night, shadows moved along the hills. The attack came, but it failed. Prepared settlers held their ground without panic. Shots were few. By sunrise, the raiders vanished, leaving behind confusion instead of corpses. Word spread fast. For the first time, people whispered something dangerous. Not all Apaches are the same. Not all cowboys want war. But peace had enemies. A cavalry patrol arrived days later, led by Captain Robert Hensley, a man who believed fear was the only language natives understood. He questioned Ethan for hours. "Why would an Apache warn you?" Hensley asked coldly. Ethan met his gaze. "Because someone once warned them." Hensley didn't smile. "You're walking a thin line, Cole," he said. "History doesn't favor men who stand in the middle." Ethan watched the soldiers ride away, dust rising behind them like an omen. He knew the truth now. Mercy had created a ripple, and ripples attract storms. Far away in the mountains, Chief Nahilzai listened as Taza finished his story. The elder chief stared into the fire, silent for a long time. Then he said, "If one man can choose peace in a land of guns, then our people must be ready when peace comes knocking." The fire crackled. The world was changing, slowly, painfully, and Ethan Cole stood unknowingly at the center of it.